Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron. The name of the program tonight is Getting Things Done because I still haven't got the audit that was due last December for the past fiscal year. Kind of sad. Town can't get its numbers together with the Board of Education and the auditors. Not a good omen. In most places that I ever been, around the world even, if you couldn't get your numbers together on time, you were in deep trouble. Because everybody immediately suspected, as we do here now, that there may be some surprises in store, and these surprises probably won't be positive. They'll probably be negative. They'll probably be over expenditures or money missing somewhere and hidden in a corner or something by mistake. Could be all kinds of things. But it will be something. I'm pretty sure of that. So when that audit is out, and I have a copy of it to look at, discuss with the town financial director, I'll have another Planning for Success program. We'll go over that. Because it is all about money now, in the middle of this recession, especially in this state and in this town and even in the country, unfortunately. All are controlled, by the way, by the Democrats. Not a good omen for the future, in my opinion. We'll talk a bit about that tonight. But, as I said once on an earlier program, you can now see any one of the three programs that I produce, Planning for Success. I only do a few a year now. They used to be one a week for a few years. But I only do them quarterly so I can keep you up to date with the big picture financially where we stand. Getting Things Done I do maybe one a month, maybe two. Sometimes I repeat it. Just trying to get across some ideas, which nobody pays much attention to, but makes me feel better that at least I'm trying to pass on tricks that I've learned along the way to help get things done. A lot of it came from reading books since I was very young. A lot of it came from personal experiences in business. A lot of it came from personal experience in travel and all that kind of thing. And I've been around a lot of places where things got done. Big things, like getting to the moon, getting the internet going, getting the world computerized, helping out the IRS get through the year 2000, biggest real-time system in the world, down in Washington, D.C. So I got plenty of experience being around very, very good, inventive, entrepreneurial people. And after you're with them for a while, you begin to see patterns. What do they do that other people don't? What do these successful people do that people that are not quite as successful, if at all, don't do? And then I started a program recently about Frank H. DeMars called Some Local History. And they can be seen 24/7 worldwide. And the people on Highland Lake are traveling around the world, or people from Winston traveling around the world, or some live in Florida, some live in New York or New England or wherever during the winter. They can tune in if they want, especially around the times when financial things are happening here. And they just go to www, if you have the internet, www ctv13.net, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Search for one of these programs. They're all dated. They got my name on them. And then you can watch them right in your home whenever you want. You know, you won't be a slave to a TV schedule. And of course, if you're away from here, you can't get Channel 13 anyway. So this is meant to be a convenience for everybody as they travel around the world and as they live, work different hours and have other social activities or watch other programs when this one's on Channel 13. The internet holds these programs up to 8 in a row, 8 weeks in a row. And then when you do the 9th program, they get rid of the first one and they circle around again. So there'll only ever be, for each one of these series, 8. The max will be up there are 8. Maybe less from time to time, depends on how things go. So when the latest is done, if there's 8 up there already, they take off the first one, toss it out, put in the latest one, and then it stays up for 8 weeks. This should be helpful to you around these next 4 months or so before the election. Now I want to talk a bit about money, so we're going to have our money picture up there. I talk quite a bit about money because I read the papers and I look around on the internet and I see all the people commenting, and it's kind of obvious that they know much about money. Most of them are very, very emotional about the needs of the town, the needs of the schools, the needs of everything. But they really don't understand money. And money is very important, as you probably all know, in your own personal lives. Now, when I was going to school, in college, I majored in mathematics. And whenever I met anybody, anywhere, in Connecticut or in Kansas or out around the world, I didn't travel that much in those days, but I did go through a lot of states when I went to and from school to Florida, things like that. People would ask me, what's your major? And I would say, my major is mathematics. And they'd all say, almost without exception, oh, I don't know anything about mathematics. And they'd go off looking for somebody else who had more in common with their own background and major. Not many of them understood mathematics. And at the time, I was an A student in mathematics. And I'm not really a great mathematician. Never wanted to be one. But it was a great discipline. I learned a lot about thinking, logic, all kinds of things. And that helped me get into my career. And my career was the early days of vacuum tube computers, when the computers were probably bigger than the town hall for just one computer. Then they had all kinds of peripherals, which did and didn't work. Sometimes the vacuum tubes weren't all synchronized, or some were failing, and 1 and 1 didn't equal 2. Everything was duplicated, just in case. And when I went from place to place, after I got into the computer industry, I got in there because of my mathematical background and because I had a lot of experience working from the age of 11 and around various entrepreneurs who I learned an awful lot from, about thought processes and how to get things done. But when I went out and talked to people, they'd say to me, where do you work? What do you do? And I'd say, I'm in computers. And they'd all look at me and say, oh, I don't know anything about computers. And they'd walk away trying to find somebody else who they had more in common with, preferably from their own industry, or maybe even a doctor or a lawyer or Indian chief who they would rather talk to than somebody who was in the computer industry and nobody had ever heard of a computer. Not many people at all. Most of the people that were in the computer industry were PhDs in math, physics, any of the sciences. I wasn't a PhD, but they were. I did have skills that a lot of them didn't have. I had the ability to talk to people, both chairmen of companies and engineers on the factory floor, that kind of thing, and take a big, long, hairy story and turn it into one sentence for the guy in the top office whose system wasn't working and his whole company was stalled and he couldn't make the payroll and he couldn't get the product out. So there was a lot of skills needed, and that helped open a lot of doors for me. And I tell you these little stories because I still feel the same way. Most people in the town, in the state, in the country do not understand finances. So unfortunately, we're kind of divided into two groups of people when it comes to this. People who understand finances and money, and people who haven't got a clue. And unfortunately, most of the people that don't understand it, they're in the majority. And I find, from my own personal experience, I'm an unaffiliated voter, not a Democrat, not a Republican, not an independent. I'm unaffiliated. That's about 60% of the voters in this town. I'm not so sure about the country, but it's a pretty big percentage of voters. But most of the people who kind of don't understand finance, in my view, always end up in the Democratic Party. There are some in all parties, of course. The ones that do understand finance tend to gravitate towards the Republican Party or another offshoot of that, like the Independent Party. Not the Green Party. That's more in line with the Democrats. But I find that kind of to be true, and it's very difficult for the two groups to communicate with each other, just like it was difficult for me to communicate with people about my math background or my computer background 50 years ago. Today it's easier. Everybody's got a computer. They're much more numerate, and more people are getting to understand the sciences than did in those days. They used to use the sciences to flunk you out of college when I was there, math and physics and courses like that. So there's a real communication problem between these groups. And I kind of, to make it easy for you to try to get the point across, and do this a lot, different groups around the world, I kind of say that you can't just look at people as party people, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, unaffiliated, whatever. I tend to look at people more as fiscal conservatives, and just to make it simple to explain it, and big spenders. And the fiscal conservatives are usually the people that want to earn money before they spend it, and not take great risk when they do so. And by not taking great risk, I don't mean that they don't take risks, of course they do, but they try to understand the risks before they enter into a situation where they could go broke, lose their job, bankrupt the company, bankrupt all the shareholders, or at least, lose them a lot of money. And it's very difficult. Money is a very complex. Finances is very complex. Money is very complex. You don't always know if you can trust the people you're talking to and relying upon. But usually, this group likes to earn money before they spend it, see the road to the future, and be kind of conservative, because they don't want to get to the point somewhere along the road where they run out of money. That is most people's biggest fear, if they understand money, that they won't be able to follow through with a lot of their personal commitments to their wives, husbands, families, parents, grandparents, relatives, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. People don't really want to be dependent on them. They want to help them. They want to be of assistance to them. Some can't, for various reasons. And some may not have the physical or mental abilities to do so. And they'll need help. There's no doubt about that. We should help them. So that's how the fiscal conservatives think. And they usually a long background in that. They either run companies or businesses, or have a lot of experience dealing with commerce and industry, hiring and firing people, laying people off, and all that kind of thing. Now in our town, they're spread across all parties, all groups. Republicans have a lot of fiscal conservatives. The Democrats have a lot of fiscal conservatives. Probably not as many as the Republicans because of the nature of the way the Democratic Party is constructed. And the unaffiliated people, I would say a lot of them are fiscal conservatives. The Independent Party. I don't know about the Green Party. I don't know much about that. But from what I see of it, it seems kind of wild. Seat of the pants type party. And that more or less falls into the other group, which is called the big spenders, who don't know much about the math and the science behind the fiscal process. Probably never ran a business, probably never had to fire anybody. Now, oddly enough, they do run their own little home business. But they don't have the experiences. I once talked to one of my neighbors last week, and he and I were 180 degrees out of phase when it came to politics. And I said, well, one of the big differences between us is I grew up in industry, I ran companies, I had my own money at stake, my future and my family at stake, had no union to back me or protect me or anything like that, had to save for my own retirement, had to make decisions to fire people and hire people and to take risk with stockholders' money. But this other person didn't have that background. Was most of his life, as I understand it, and I might be a little wrong on this, was in either the employee of the state or the federal government, one way or another, probably a member of the unions, and pretty much protected, as you know, for retirement and for health benefits and for job security and all those kind of things that a combination of the state and unions provide. So there's a big difference in our thought processes and our way of approaching problems. Doesn't mean we don't get along socially, we do. But we don't have too many discussions because we're in opposite sides, and people always feel strongly where they know more and where their experience lies. So on the big spender side, we have people who are just the opposite of the fiscal conservatives. They usually like to spend money before they earn it. let's go get a big loan from the government, most likely, or from a bank if we can. Let's pay interest on it, and let's build a new school. Or let's build a bunch of firehouses, or let's build a new police station. Without much thought as to how they're going to pay for it. Some people think that if they get it that way, it's free. It's a gift. But it isn't. One way or another, the owners of our business, the town of Winchester, have to pay for that. I'll probably give you a few examples tonight as I go through the rest of the program of some of these thought processes. And I want to start out with a simple one. I was listening to a Polish radio program last Saturday morning. I always listen to it starting 6 in the morning on the Hartford University station there. Johnny Pritko is the guy's name who runs it. I don't know him, never met him, but I listen to him a lot. I like Polish music, as well as a lot of other foreign music, because I spent a lot of time around the world, and I spent a lot of time in Poland. But Johnny Pritko is a fiscal conservative, in my opinion. And he told a story, whether it was a joke or a story or was true, I don't know, because when I tuned him in, he was in the middle of the story. But he talked about a person in Connecticut who owned the business. And when all the taxes went up a few weeks ago and all the new rules came out from the state government, he went to one of his employees, managers, and said, look, we've always tried to run this as a business, as a family business. Even though we have a lot of employees and they're not family members, we try to run this business as a family person. We try not to lay anybody off. We try not to do anything, that'll make it hard for these people. We try to do well for them. But because of these new rules, I'm going to have to lay off some people for the first time in a long time. And I'm paraphrasing here. Johnny might have used a word or two different. And I have to lay some people off. And boy, that breaks my heart, because we're family. I thought about it. I stewed about it. And finally I said, I just have to do this. Just keep the rest of the people in jobs. That's a little bit of reverse psychology there. You got to think of all the people when you make these decisions, not just a few that are being laid off. People will say, well, we can't lay Jane and Johnny off. When somebody else says, well, we have to lay Jane and Johnny off, or otherwise the other 60 people's jobs will be in jeopardy over time. So what he did was, he went out in the parking lot, according to Johnny Pritko, and he looked at all the cars, and he looked for the Obama bumper stickers. And when he saw the Obama bumper stickers, he took note, and then he laid those people off, because he felt they were partly responsible for these programs that were putting his company in jeopardy. I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, I myself had a little experience here in the last week or so, which I thought was kind of interesting. I went in one store that sells a lot of cigarettes, and I asked them, how's the cigarettes going since the price went up 50 cents a packet, and now it costs $10 for a packet, $100 for a carton, roughly. And the fellow told me, well, we're not selling as many cigarettes anymore now. People are being very careful, and they're trying to cut their smoking down. Matter of fact, he said, I'm rolling my own. And a lot of other people are starting to roll their own. Instead of paying $100 for a carton, they pay $20 or so rolling their own, and you can get machines now to help you roll your own cigarettes. It wasn't like when we were kids and you had to roll them, and they didn't look too good at the time. And that the sales were dropping off because people were couldn't afford it anymore. Just couldn't afford it, the habit they had. Now, of course, some people will probably steal to buy cigarettes and get themselves in trouble and all that, but most people can't afford it. Can't afford $100 for a carton of cigarettes, which are loaded with tax and other things. Now, you may say, well, that's a good thing. Less people will smoke. But you got to remember, as less people smoke, then less cigarettes will be produced, and less people will be required for the jobs to produce those cigarettes. Now, the cigarettes are just an example. That's true for a lot of things that are being affected by the 60 or 70 budget changes that were made in the state of Connecticut and passed on to small businesses and to the taxpayers over the last couple of weeks, or 3-4 weeks, whatever it's been now. So I went up to another store looking for some things for my construction, and I told the story to a person in the store, and the person said, "Oh, I do the same thing. I roll my own now." Showed me some of his cigarettes and told me he used the machine, and cost him $20 a carton instead of $100. Then I went into another store in the area, and I was asking them how's cigarette sales going, and they said, "Oh, well, we don't sell cigarettes anymore since the last week or two. We just got out of the cigarette business. I guess it was more trouble than it was worth. Not enough people were going to buy them anymore, and it would probably be more overhead to carry cigarettes than not." Then they said, "Oh, yeah, we're also getting out of the lottery business. We're not selling lottery tickets anymore." My guess is, and it was more work to sell the tickets and make a pittance on that in that particular place than it was to sell them. So the point I'm trying to make to you here is that in the situation we're in now in the economy, in the state, in the country, and in the town, money's tough. It's tough to get any money. A lot of people have lost their job. There are rules being put in place by the feds and the state and to put more of a burden on small businesses who do most of the hiring in this country. And those burdens force these people not to hire as much or to raise their costs, which then will affect their business. That's going on all around us. So everybody is watching their wallet. Now, in the last few referendums we had in our town over the last 6 months, I did say to you that people would be voting their pocketbook. They don't totally understand the situation, but they do understand their pocketbook. They know if they want to buy a carton of cigarettes, it's going to cost them $10. And to spend 10, they probably got to earn 15. To spend 100, they got to earn 140, we'll say. Some more, some less. Or they have to give up something else, maybe food, maybe hygiene, maybe medical attention, to pay for those cigarettes or whatever else it is. So guess what? In the last two referendums we had, one about selling property to the giving property to the land trust, that selling it, getting the money from the state to pay for it, we would end up with about $350,000 and lose a lot of our rights to these lands around here, around Crystal Lake and around Highland Lake. Got voted down. Couldn't get enough people to vote in favor of it at the referendum. Also, the budget. When the selectmen began to say enough's enough, 4 of the selectmen, 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat, when they began to say enough's enough, and it went to referendum after the town budget meeting, it got voted. It got voted in, the cut in the budget. I guess it was about 800 people showed up, and more than half voted in favor of the reduced budget for the town. Now, there's a lot of hoo-ha about that right now. And almost all the hoo-ha in town right now is hoo-ha about financial matters, which, surprise, surprise, most people don't understand, because that's a weak area in their background, in their education, in their experience. It's the people who run businesses, the people who've had the training, the education, the proper degrees. Just because you got a degree in ecology doesn't mean you understand business, finance. Doesn't mean you don't either. There are some exceptions. But it's usually the ecology interest will take you in a different direction than a master's degree in business. So I want to talk now a bit about the last election 2 years ago and give you an idea about the voting that happened. The first thing I want to tell you is that the total numbers that were on the registry list to vote in the last local election, by the way, people that vote in other states and other places like Florida or New York or Mass, they can't vote in these elections here. They can only vote in elections where it comes to money. But as far as our selectmen are concerned, Board of Education members and all, they're not allowed to vote there. So the total number of names on the registry list is 7,054, last election 2 years ago. The number of names that were checked voting absentee ballot was 68. So out of that 7,054, 68 voted absentee. The number of names that were checked by the machine vote, you vote on machines here in our town, was 2,193. And the total number, if you add the two together, the absentee ballots and the ones on the machine, the total numbers of people who voted were 2,261. That's who voted for our selectmen, our Board of Education, our town clerk, and other more minor functions that we vote for, constables, that kind of thing. So the total number that voted were 2,261. The total that did not vote 2 years ago was 4,793. So 4,793, almost 5,000 didn't vote out of 7,054. Not too good a percentage. So that's one of the problems we have when it comes to these elections. Maybe we can improve on this year, maybe we can't. But getting people to show up and vote in these elections has always been a problem. It's not only a problem here, it's a problem at other levels of government as well. And as I said, when we voted on the budget a few months ago, 800 and something out of 7,000 showed up to vote that were eligible. And that vote was for the town budget for the fiscal year that we're in now, started July 1st. And that's what a lot of the hoo-ha is about. Now I want to go through quickly how the voting went in the last election, just to show you, make a few points to you. It was basically the people in the Democratic Party and Republican Party that won the selectman seat. I'm only going to do the selectman in the last election. And 4 of the previous Republican selectmen didn't run for office. They were so disgusted with the whole process, they didn't even bother to run. They had too much of importance to do in their own life and felt they weren't getting things done the way they thought they should. So the first and number 1 vote getter was Selectman Perez, a Democrat. He's an educator. From what I can see, not very numerate. She tries to make you think she's numerate by keeping a computer in front of her when she's on TV and stuff, but I know enough about computers to not let that fool me. But most people don't, so they probably get fooled by it. But anyway, she got 1,211 votes. Selectman Fracasso, the Republican, lifelong citizen. Perez is from Torrington originally, although her father had a summer home up here on the lake. Fracasso, the Republican, went through our school systems, and he's a lifelong resident, successful businessman. He had 1,202 votes, just 9 votes short of the Democrat, Perez. So he came in second. Clausen, who was suing the town at the time, the Democrat, got 1,034 sympathy votes by people who thought he was being maligned and wanted to show support. So he was third. Next was Albanesius, who had no experience at all as a selectman, nor did Clausen. He got 977 votes. He doesn't exactly have name recognition, name Albanesius. Not many people knew who he was at the time. He was a citizen of Winston, went through a certain amount of schools, but then he went to trade school, then he got a master's degree somewhere, and he lives out in Winchester. He's a salesman, travels a lot. Very numerate. And then came Selectman Renzullo, a Democrat, who got 913 votes. Renzullo happens to be good with the internet and things like that and getting to youth, and he scraped up 913 votes one way or the other in his campaign. And then came Democrat Lisa R. Smith, that the Democrats ran after working with her for 2 years when they were not in power. And she got 869 votes, many of them on the coattails of Clausen and Perez, some on her own merit, because she did have a lot of experience working on committees and commissions in the town, has 5 children. She's from Texas, married a Winston native, came here somewhere along the line. And then there was a Republican, Ms. Shea, who got 835. She was next on the list with 835. And it looks like I left off the list, but I'll get it from over here. Karen Beadle got 940, so that would put her about 5th on the list. And they all got elected except Shay, because we only picked 7 selectmen. So they all got elected. Now, the strange thing about this whole thing is that they used to call the previous selectmen, which were 5 Republicans and 2 Democrats, the followers of the Democrats used to call them the Gang of 5. That's a term usually used in politics around the world, from what I can see, when they really think that one party or the other has too much power. So there was a lot of noise for 2 years. The Nader supporters were involved, and the Democratic supporters and some other supporters from different groups were involved. And they basically drove out the 4 Republicans who had enough. They didn't want to be involved anymore, felt it was more harmful than good to their families and to themselves and to their businesses and to the town. So they didn't run again. So this time, the Democrats, Perez, Clausen, Albanese, and Smith, won. And they got into power because they had 4 of the 7 votes. They also professed, they didn't say much at all in their campaign. There was no basic platform that I could see, except let's all work together, let's all get along together, let's not be like the Gang of 5, let's all work together. Now, unfortunately for the Democrats, they hadn't done their homework properly. They thought that they had one of their members in their, under their direction, Lisa Smith. And Lisa Smith turned out in the end to be a woman of her own mind, did what she thought was right. So she often voted in the last 2 years with the Republicans on the major issues. This upset the Democrats terribly. So they had run on a platform of getting along with everybody. And of course, they couldn't even get along with a member of their own party. So they started to make comments in the press and comments in the blogs. And in the end, they said, okay, we're not, from what I hear, we're not going to back you in the next election. You can't run as a Democrat with the sanction of the Democratic Town Committee. And that helped the fiscal conservatives, because Lisa's basically a fiscal conservative, the way she votes. And that switched the power around on some of the major votes. The votes on education budget, the votes on the town budget, the votes on the property they wanted to sell off to the land trust. And that angered the Democrats. So the Democrats are in a position, they still are to this day, where they can't get along with the Republicans, and they can't get along with one of their own members of the Board of Selectmen. So in effect, they're kind of in the minority right now, even though they won the election as a majority. And the reason I'm going over this now is because in the last couple days, each party, Republicans and Democrats, last couple days, have announced their candidates for the election in November. And I want to go over that with you now. You can read about it in either paper. The papers in our area here, the 3 papers, one in Winston and the other 2 in Torrington and Waterbury, tend to lean towards more the Democratic Party and their philosophies than they do the Republican Party or the Taxpayer Association or anybody like that, who have more conservative approach to things. So you got to be a little careful what you read there. You got to be very careful what you read in the blogs, because most people don't even sign their name. Often the letters that are in the editor don't have the facts in them. Facts are a scarce commodity around here. So I want to say to you now that they could have gotten along much better, I think. But Fracasso got the number of votes 1,202. He got 130 or so more than Clausen. But the Democrats elected Clausen to be the vice mayor, or whatever they call him, the understudy to the mayor, so that when the mayor's away, he runs the meeting. Wouldn't it have been a nice gesture if they had made Fracasso the second selectman instead of Clausen? Then that would show they were going to try to work together. But they didn't do that. It's something I would have done if I were trying to get two different groups to work together. That would have done a lot more, I think, to help. It wouldn't have solved all the friction that we have now, but it would have helped to get things going in the right direction. So for a party to say, we want to work together, and that's our whole platform, we can get along, we'll all work together, and we'll all be nice to each other, and then to slight the second highest vote getter when it came to second in command of the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Board, they didn't stick with that. And I don't think that helped them any at all. But anyway, now we have the people that are running this time. And as usual, it breaks down into fiscal conservatives, who are the people that want to earn before they spend and to try to run within the budget and to try to manage within the budget and to make all the tough decisions you need to come up with a budget that can be managed to, and to get all the information you need to come up with that budget, and to get the audits from everybody, and to make the tough decision, which the Finance Board has to do, to where to cut the budget. Now, the Board of Education here, from my experience, which has been over 7-8 years here, they never want to cut the budget. They always want to add to the budget. And they kind of pass the buck up to the Finance Board to cut the budget when necessary. And this year they passed a hefty budget up to the selectmen, and they cut it back. The three Republicans and Lisa Smith, quite rightly, in my opinion. And they're trying to manage it. And the state's saying, well, even though you got less money, you got less students, and your schools are half empty, and you want to close a school, you still got to spend more next year on your budget. So that's all being talked about between the town and the state. And then the school board, they sued the town. We pay for that, me and you. They sued the selectmen, both the town and the selectmen individually, the 4 selectmen that were involved. So it's a real mess right now. It's terrible. So a lot of people don't want to run for office. They don't want to get involved. They got better things to do with their life. And that's especially true with people at the lake who come here to enjoy the thing. Most 60% of them come part-time in the summer and are here the rest of the year. And they don't even vote on these selectmen or Board of Education. So for the Republicans, the fiscal conservative people, you have Fracasso running for the 3rd time. Karen Beadle, I can't even count the time she ran, but she's been running over the years. Done a very good job this year, as has Fracasso. Glenn Albanese is running again. And a lady who lives in Winchester has been very, very helpful over the last few years to the fiscal conservatives no matter where they reside in all this political system here, the town, the education system, the state. Marcia Sterling was very numerate, got a very, very good fiscal background, and she's done quite well. She's fairly relatively young compared to me, anyway. They're the fiscal conservatives. They have 4 that they got to run. They could have run 5. But it's really tough to turn up a 5th solid, good fiscal conservatives, because most of the fiscal conservatives have businesses one way or another, and they don't want to make any enemies. I had a friend who was a fiscal conservative in Torrington, and he ran a business, but he joined the Democratic Party because everybody else was a Democrat, and he didn't want to lose any business. We have a little bit of that here in Winsted. You can't get always the best people. Now, certain people do their business outside the town. It's a little easier for them. Fracasso does most of his business outside of Winsted. As I understand it, so does Karen Beadle. Glenn Albanesius, although he does have some business in the town as well. And then Marcia Sterling, who's retired from the financial industry and is very, very good and very, very smart, lives out in Winchester area, nice estate out there. Now the Democrats, who I don't think have done much at all in the last 2 years, they think they've done a lot, but I don't see any evidence of it. They didn't have a platform to start with, and the one thing they had on their platform to get along with everybody, they didn't do. There's more problems now with people getting along than I've ever seen before here in my short time back, last 10 years or so. But Selectman Perez is going to run for office again. This will probably be her 5th time or so, maybe it's 6th, but it's up in that neck of the woods. My own opinion is that she should stick to teaching school, and then we'd all be better off for that. Clausen, who tried to sue the town a few years ago and cost us about $40,000, he's running again. I don't think he's done too much in the last 2 years either to help us get out of our fiscal problems we have here now. Selectman Renzullo, who I don't call him a fiscal conservative, that's for sure. None of these are. But he's at least trying. He's made an offer that I would have never made as a businessman to Capital Products. He's trying to do a good deed there. Whether he succeeds or not, time will tell. Very expensive proposition from a person who has minimal experience in that area. Marianne Welcome, who was selectman for about 10 years, mayor for 1 or 2 terms. She's running again. She has name recognition. I don't think she's a fiscal conservative. I mean, this same group just 4 years ago or so wanted to spend $54 million, about 13 of that million was interest over the next 20 years, to clean up all the schools that are now half empty and that we're trying to get rid of one of them, to redo the fire departments, redo the police station, and a few things like that. That never made it. Matter of fact, that would have never flown. Still won't fly. So they're not exactly fiscal conservatives, because they're also against the major development that tried to come into town a few years back, and that would have helped us a lot as a town. We're probably never going to get an opportunity like that again. And then there's a guy named Jim DeVito, who you might all know, who's on the Board of Education. He's a spender. He likes to spend the money before it's earned, as far as I can see from his. Like the guy personally, I don't have a problem with him personally, but I don't think I'd let him manage my money. So you got 5 people from the Democratic Party running for office and 4 Republicans. The independent party has yet to be heard from. They'll be letting us know in a week or two whether they're running any candidates or not. Anybody who wants to run for selectman by petition has not surfaced yet. There are rumors that one or two may be doing that. That they'll come out in the next week or two, and then we'll know exactly what our slate is and who's on it, and then you can make your decisions who you think you should vote for or not. But I would say the times we're in, with all the problems we have, with all the dissensions we have in town, with a huge part of our budget, 65%, being spent on education, with the state not cooperating with us as a team member on our budgets, and pretty sad situation we're in here. So I got to look at it myself, but I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be encouraging people to vote for the fiscal conservatives, the people who want to earn money, bring in new businesses, industry to town, developments if they're profitable, and to try to make things happen. I'm a little disappointed in the new town manager. I read an article by him this week which says he thinks that we need to go into, we need a plan, and we need to get all the regs updated, and that's sort of the propaganda you get from the Democrats. I don't agree with that. I think you've got to be working on that, don't get me wrong. And most towns don't follow that philosophy. What they do is they go out and look for good companies to come in, good developments to come in, good industry to come in, and they get them here. And we have a lot of people who have come to town that are commercial, that are industrial. We just have Verizon coming to town in one of the buildings, if it all goes through, to cell phones and cards and things. So people will come now. I personally don't think that the EDC is the mechanism for making this happen. I think they're a big help, and they can do a lot, and they can go along with things. But as a selectman, the Board of Finance have to make it happen with the town manager. There's some reluctance there on the part of the Democrats. So if I were you, I'd look at all these, decide which camp you're in, and then vote. I'm pretty sure most of you will be voting your pocketbook, as you have over the last few years and will over the next few years. So with that, I want to thank you. If some major news breaks, I'll come back. Otherwise, I'll run this program for a couple weeks and come back when there's something to say. Thank you very much. Remember, we're on the internet, www.ctv13.net, 24/7 around the world. So if you want to see this program repeated, or tell any of your friends, or tell people in other countries or wherever, that's what they can do. Thank you very much.